Hello, today I'd like to show you how to make a pocket bag just using 2 fat quarters and some cord. So you just need to have 2 fat quarters and you need to have a total of 1 1/3 yards of cord, which we're going to cut in half so that you've got 2 pieces of cord. So to start off with, we need to cut from the 2 fat quarters, and I've got 2 positioned here on my board, and I've ironed them nice and flat and I've placed them right sides together, and I'm going to cut a 17-inch square from those 2 together. So using the markings on my board to help me, because 17 inches is quite large, I'm going to trim off down one side so that it's a nice neat edge together, and then come along here 17 inches and trim off the other side. Remove that bit, and then I'm going to, by keeping these 2 together, but I'm going to turn them around, and the same thing, I'm going to trim this edge, and then I've lined mine up with the markings on the board, and I'm going to come across to the 17-inch mark again and just trim that edge off there, so that now I've got this nice 17-inch square of my 2 fabrics, which I now need to sew together all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam, but I need to leave a 3-inch gap on one of the sides so that I can turn it out the right way. So now I'm going to go to the machine and do that. So just leave the needle in at the corner so that you can pivot it round, and then go all the way around, just remembering to leave a 3-inch gap where you started off. So I'm coming along the last bit now, and I've just got to remember to leave a 3-inch gap before I get to the end. And now I'm going to trim off the little corners so that when I turn it out the right side, the corners pop out nice and neatly. Don't cut through your stitching, just trim off the fabric. And when I find my gap, I'm going to turn my fabric squares out the right way. So I'm turning my square out the right way, and I need to make sure that my 4 corners are nicely popped out. By popping my hand inside, I can do that. And if any of the corners are a little bit stubborn and don't want to be nice and sharp, you could use a little pin to just help pull them out afterwards, but don't be too rough on it because it would make a hole if you're not careful. But these seem to have come out quite nicely. Now I've chosen here 2 nice fabrics that contrast well with each other, and this is because in this bag here we've got these pockets and we've got the lining inside the pocket there, so in fact the bag is all the one fabric except for these pockets that we've got on the outside here. So the lining fabric that you've chosen won't show on the outside, but it's there when you look inside the little pockets. And so now we need to press that out nice and smoothly and press the gap so that it sits nicely, so that we can join it up and it won't even show later on. So starting with the gap to get it sitting nice and flat, and making sure that your sides are all nice and straight. Just give that a nice press and make sure those corners are sitting out nicely. So there are our squares sitting nice and flat and double-sided. Now before we go any further, we're going to have to join that gap up in a minute, but we should just cut the cord ends out from the leftover bit of fabric from your fat quarter, and this is to make the little ends for the cord. So I would now cut 2 strips 1.5 inches wide by 2.5 inches long. And I use the markings on my board for all my measuring. I find that it's the easiest way and it's consistent. And while I've got the iron out, I would take those to the iron and lay them right side down, and I would fold back just 1/4 of an inch at each of the short ends and just press those. And now I'll go back to the machine and I'll just quickly stitch those cord ends. So I'm going to fold them right sides together so that the folded edge is at the top, and I'm going to machine 1/4 inch seam down either side. And I can pop them both through at the same time. And now I can clip them apart and clip their corners and turn them the right way out, and then they're all ready for when we need them, when we've got the cord in the bag. They're a little bit fiddly to turn out the right way, but not impossible. You might find you need a little something like maybe your scissors that'll help just gently push those corners out so that you've got 2 nice little square pockets, and we'll use those a bit later. Then we need to close the gap on this nice big square that we have here, and I find it. Here it is. And you could slip stitch this with a little hand slip stitch, but I'm actually just going to sew mine on the machine, just very close to the edge. And there I have now my nice double-sided square. So now I want to lay it with the right side of the outside fabric that I'm using on the inside. I'm going to fold it over in half into a triangle, so right across the middle there diagonally. And I'm going to line it up on my board so that my fold runs along a straight line and my point comes out at a line up there so that it's sitting nice and square. And this is because I'm now going to measure either side of the centre line as to where I'm going to do a sewing line. So I might use my ruler, or certainly the markings on the board. I need to mark a line. If you can see it with a pen or pencil on your fabric would be ideal, and you want to mark a line that's just about 4 inches, so just under 4 inches either side of the centre mark. So I would just draw a line here that's just under the 4 inches, and I'll do the same coming this way as well, so just under 4 inches, and draw that line there. Now there's one more marking you need to make. So from where that line is coming out here, you want to mark 1/2 inch down from there. And again, my ruler has got a 1/2 inch mark, so I'm just going to use that. I'm going to line it up so that it goes through that marking there, and I'm going to mark 1/2 inch down on that line that we've just drawn. So that I've got 2 markings here, 1/2 inch down from those sides. And I'm going to pop a little pin across there so that I can see it easily. And I'm going to just pop a couple of pins into here just to hold it. You don't really need them there, but it just helps hold it folded over like that. And now I'm going to stitch down this line, starting at where my pins are, and I'm going to stitch all the way down either side there. So starting just near your pin here, do a little back stitch to hold it, and you're stitching on that drawn line. All the way down to the fold. And now the same thing on the other side. It's probably easier to turn it round, and just remember to stop where your pin is at the other end. So starting from the fold, and stopping where the pin is and doing a little back stitch to hold it. And now I don't need these pins in it to hold it any longer. And so now I want to open those corners out and fold them back. So you can pop that corner out, and that should sit quite nicely back. And that corner there should be coming up fairly close to where your stitching finished on that side. And the same thing with the other one. Now being careful to keep this corner that you've just folded back inside there. You want to turn this one back, pop your corner out, and sit that nicely over there as well. So you can already see how this is coming together. Just make sure that one has stayed nice and smooth inside there. You can usually feel how it's sitting. So just making sure that your corners are sitting nice. That's going to sit up close to that corner. I'm just going to pop a pin in just to hold that. Not too close to the corner, because we're now going to turn it out the other way, but we want them to sit. So I popped a pin either side just to hold that there. Now we're going to turn that in the other way, so we want to push those corners through whilst trying to keep this sitting quite nicely together. This is probably the trickiest bit of this bag. So now we've got this shape here, but we just need to make sure that those bits are sitting nice and evenly and smooth inside, because now we're going to just trim off the, well, not trim, but we're going to sew the corners. We're going to do what they call paper bag corners. That means that we're going to open that out. So you should be able to feel that that corner that we brought across is sitting there, and we're going to open that out so that our seam comes straight down into our point, and we're going to sew across there. So again, using the markings on my board, I'm going to sew about 1 inch in from the point. So I'm going to pop a pin in there just to help me see that, and I'll get the other one ready at the same time. Again, just make sure that where you're feeling it inside it, everything's sitting nice and smooth, and opening out that corner so that it's sitting nice and flat. And again, pop a pin in 1 inch from your point. Now you can have a look before you sew that everything looks like it's sitting smoothly inside, and then we're just going to sew across those corners. This is actually the inside of your bag that you're working on at the moment, even though it's the outside fabric. Confusing, hey? So we've now done our corners, and because it's all just nice fabric, we don't need to cut them off or anything. And now we're going to turn it back out the other way again. And if you pop those little bits out that you've just sewn, you'll find that you get a nice sort of flat bottom to your bag. So now we're going to make the casing for the cord. So if we lay that down, if you remember, we started 1/2 inch down when we were doing our sewing. So when we fold that over, we're folding over so that it's 1/2 inch from that edge and both sides, so that on the sides here you should have a 1/2 inch fold over where there's no sewing. And we're going to pop some pins in there just to help hold that in place. And do this side as well. Make sure that it's sitting nice and flat underneath. And do the other side too. You should have a nice straight edge on that fold where it comes over there. And I would just pop another pin just along there, just so that everything's sitting nice and flat. And the same on the other side. And now we're going to sew right the way around there, 1/2 inch down from your folded edge, all the way around the bag. So if you've got a free arm on your sewing machine, that would be really good to take your table part off so that you can place the bag over the free arm. Now if you don't have a free arm on your machine, that's no problem, but you'll need to turn the bag inside out, and then you'll find that you can sew it just holding the bag. It's a little bit more complicated perhaps, but the free arm is ideal but not essential. You can manage without one by turning the bag inside out and sewing it that way. But because I've got a free arm, this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to just, it doesn't really matter where you start, you're going to be sewing 1/2 inch down from your folded edge all the way around the bag. And this forms the casing for your cord. And I might just do a little back stitch over the join bit, just to give it a little bit of strength. Back at the beginning, and what I normally do now is I do another row of stitching very close to that top folded edge. This is not essential, but I quite like the finish that it gives me in the end, so I do this extra row of stitching just very close to the top folded edge now. To the beginning, clip off your threads, and now your bag is just about done. We've just got to pop the cords in, and you can see here when you lift that flap up that you can see the nice lining, and you're going to have a pocket here, but currently you're going to have that a little bit loose there. You could leave it that way, but what I usually do is I do a little bit of hand stitching down there just with a little slip stitch. You can probably see here that I've just done it down here, and that just holds that nice and firm, that firms up the pocket aspect on the outside. So you can just do that a little bit later, just hand sew it all the way along up this to that point, just without catching in the back side of the bag, and the same on the other side, just hand stitch up to that point there, so that that just forms a nice firm pocket for you. But now I'll show you how we put the cord in. Now it's quite handy to have a couple of spare safety pins. I usually use a safety pin to thread my cord in. So I've got I had 1 1/3 yards of cord to start with, and I've cut that in half, so I've got 2 lengths here, and I'm going to start off threading them both on together. So I'm going to pop them onto a pin and close it, and now I'm going to thread that through into that casing there. Now because we've got these funny little folds and things, there's a couple of little things to look out for. So start threading that through with both bits of cord at this stage to go halfway around the bag only. Now when I get here, I may find that my pin gets a little bit tangled up, but no, it's going to behave very nicely today, so that's really good. And now I'm going to take one of those bits of cord off the pin, because I only want one to go all the way around, because the other one has to stop and start at this end. So it just saves a little bit of time to bring them both through that half first. So then I'm going to pull that through. You don't want to let that end go. You want to see that it's still sitting there, and now I'm going to take that bit of cord all the way through the other side of the bag. and here it has got caught up in the little fold. So if that should happen, if the pin won't come out because it's got into the fold behind there, grab another safety pin, close it, pop it into the hole where you want the cord to come out, and then pop the safety pin that's inside, you can do this by feel, behind that pin, and that should then chase it so that it comes out the same hole, and you can just pull that through. Now I might just pop both of those ends on that pin while I just finish threading the other one before we sew the ends on. Now we have to come back to this one. We now want these ends to be at the opposite side to this one. So we grab another safety pin to thread it through with. Now you may have a bodkin or something, but I tend to always just come back to using the safety pins for this because I always have some on hand. And I'm going to thread that all the way through. Just make sure that your other end doesn't disappear there. And bring your pin out of the hole. And now we can sew the ends on, which we prepared earlier when we were making those little bits and pieces. Okay, can we stop? So now I've got my cords and I need to pop the ends on that we prepared earlier, these little square pockety bits. So I'm going to just poke the two ends into that little piece there, and I'm going to just stitch across there to hold them in place. So I'm going to sew over it and I'm going to sew back again. That just gives it a double row of stitching, which helps hold the cord nice and firm. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side. And snip my threads and we're all done. So I've got both the ends on my cords now, and when I pull those up, because we've done the two going from the opposite sides, it pulls up really nicely. And there you've got your little pocket, which we're just going to hand sew that a little bit later. And there's a pocket on both sides. And what a neat little bag. It's a great little take around bag for some little projects for you, or you could take your coffee mug in it if you were going out somewhere and you needed to have a coffee mug with you, or whatever it is that you want a nice little bag for. There you have it. So just to recap, we used 2 fat quarters, one for the main fabric and one for the lining fabric, and we used 1 1/3 yards of cord, which we cut in half so that a piece goes either way, and we just cut some little bits for our ends. Thank you.